afternoon. Welcome to the Analyst. Today we'll be taking up 6 newspaper articles from the Hindu and the Indian Express and discussing them. The handout for the same will be available in the description of this video for your kind perusal. Please have a look at that. The first article that we'll take up is related to the India-Pakistan relations, as the Parliamentary Standing Committee on External Affairs has sought the clarity from the government regarding the future engagement with Pakistan. The second article is related to the expansion of the glacial lakes, as the glacial lakes in Arunachal Pradesh have been expanding as per a study. In the mains value addition section, we'll be discussing a few case laws related to the expanding interpretation of Article 21 of the Constitution of India. Additionally, we'll take up 4 articles in the prelims pointer section which will be helpful for your prelims preparation. The first article is related to India-Pakistan relations, as there have been calls from some political leaders in India to increase the people-to-people ties with Pakistan. Therefore, the Parliamentary Standing Committee on External Affairs sought the clarity from the government regarding the future engagement with Pakistan. Therefore, we'll discuss the evolution of the ties between India and Pakistan, the challenges that the bilateral relations face, especially the border disputes, the trade ties, and a few suggestions in this regard. This is important in GS2 under the topic India and its neighborhood relations. First, let us observe the evolution of the relations between India and Pakistan. The partition of India was a gift of the British to us. India was also partitioned at the time of gaining of independence. This led to one of the largest human migrations in the anthropological history. There was large-scale population transfer between India and Pakistan. This also led to riots, even violence also. Therefore, the first phase of the relations between India and Pakistan was a phase of active aggression. This extended right from 1947 onwards to more than half a century. And immediately upon gaining independence, Pakistan tried to gain the possession of Kashmir, which was, is, and will always remain an integral part of India, part of the territory of India. In the war of 1948, Pakistan occupied a part of Kashmir. The Pakistan occupied Kashmir, whereas the Maharaja Hari Singh had signed an instrument of accession in favor of India. Again in 1965, the two countries went to war, which led to a United Nations, a UN-mandated ceasefire, and this led to the signing of the Tashkent Agreement. The Tashkent Agreement was signed between the Indian Prime Minister of that time, Lal Bahadur Shastri, and the Pakistan President Ayub Khan in 1966, agreeing that the pre-war status quo will be maintained. Again, there was a war in 1971. This time the war was regarding Bangladesh. The liberation of East Pakistan was needed because West Pakistan refused to acknowledge the premiership of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman in East Pakistan. Therefore, East Pakistan needed liberation. This led to again a war in 1971 between India and Pakistan, and ultimately the Shimla Agreement was signed. As per the Shimla Agreement, any future disputes between India and Pakistan, they will be resolved bilaterally without the intervention of any third party. But Pakistan repeatedly violates the Shimla Agreement by cropping up the issue related to Kashmir at the United Nations, for example. Then there was the Siachen conflict in 1984, because the boundary demarcation between India and Pakistan after the Shimla Agreement, that was left undemarcated north of the point NJ9842. The point NJ9842 is the southernmost point of the Siachen Glacier. Thereafter, Pakistan started claiming the Siachen Glacier also, whereas it is also an integral part of the territory of India. Therefore, through the Operation Meghdoot in 1984, India gained the control of the Siachen Glacier and placed its troops along the Saltoro Ridge. 1980s to 1990s, that was a region where Pakistan was fueling insurgency in Kashmir. Pakistan was pumping money into India, pumping terrorists into India, sending infiltrators into India in order to destabilize the Kashmir region. And in 1998, both the countries conducted the nuclear tests, and there was a war in 1999, the Kargil War, where Pakistan again infiltrated the line of control and India regained the territory at that time. In 2001, again there was an attack on the Parliament of India. That attack was sponsored by the Lashkar-e-Taiba and the Jaish-e-Mohammed in Pakistan. The second phase starts from 2001 onwards. This phase also involved aggression, but this phase involved only sporadic attacks rather than continuous aggression, which was experienced in the previous half century. From 2001 to 2008, we can call it a phase of reconciliation to an extent. In 1999, there was the Lahore Declaration, and subsequently there was a focus upon the confidence building measures between the two countries. For example, before conducting missile tests, both countries were supposed to give warnings to each other so that the other is not caught by surprise and the countries have the confidence of each other. The Vajpayee's doctrine was also brought into force. The doctrine included the focus upon Insaniyat, Jamhuriyat and Kashmiriyat to ensure peace in the region. Insaniyat, that is humanism; Jamhuriyat, that is democracy; Kashmiriyat, that is the promulgation of the Kashmiri ethos for amity, for peace. Then in 2004 SAARC summit, Pakistan even committed, it even pledged that it will not allow terror to emanate from its soil, the terror which is targeted upon India, that it will not allow any terrorist activities on its soil which are targeting India. In 2008, India even joined the Tapi pipeline, the Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India pipeline. This was important because India imports energy. Even today, we import a significant chunk of our crude oil and natural gas needs, and Central Asian region is rich in the energy reserves. They have natural gas. India could have imported it via the Tapi pipeline. India's energy security needs would have met. Pakistan would also have gained from it because it would have earned the forex reserves via allowing the energy routes through the land route in Pakistan. But in 2008 itself, there were again the Mumbai attacks, the attacks which were led by the Lashkar-e-Taiba. And therefore, this was again in line with the philosophy of Pakistan of bleeding India with 1,000 cuts. This led to the next phase, the third phase of passive bilateralism from 2008 to 2015. The bilateral relations between the two countries were marked by passive bilateralism because there was suspicion post the Mumbai attacks. Therefore, there was a limited focus upon dialogue. Rather, the focus was more upon fixing responsibility, fixing accountability of the terror emanating from the Pakistani soil and targeting India. In 2014, then we came up with the Neighborhood First policy, wherein we again prioritized our relations with the South Asian countries. We prioritized our engagement with the SAARC countries. We came up with various goodwill gestures. For example, the fishermen were released. The Pakistani Prime Minister attended Prime Minister Modi's oath-taking ceremony in 2014, and even Prime Minister Modi visited Pakistan in 2015, and that was the first Indian Prime Minister visiting Pakistan in more than a decade. But this phase was also short-lived, because from 2015 onwards, again there was renewed aggression. Why? Because there was a launch of the CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor extends from the Xinjiang province in China to the Gwadar port in Pakistan. But it passes through the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, which is an integral part of India, and therefore it violates our territorial integrity and sovereignty. Therefore, we naturally protested against it. And there was a wave of terrorism as well from 2015 to 2019 especially. For example, there was the Pathankot attack, Uri attack, Pulwama attack. And in return, India also had to respond. Therefore, Indian responses in 2016, the surgical strikes post the Uri attack, the Balakot airstrike in 2019 post the Pulwama attack, and India also revoked the MFN status that India had earlier granted to Pakistan, the most favored nation status. The most favored nation status is a WTO principle, a principle in the World Trade Organization, where a member of the WTO, if it has granted a most favored nation status to any nation, any other WTO member, then if it is giving trade benefits to any other WTO member country, then the same benefits will also have to be given to the WTO member country to whom the most favored nation status has been granted. But India revoked that to Pakistan. And in 2019, the Article 370 was abrogated in India. Pakistan protested against it. The Pakistan downgraded ties with India. And then subsequently, India even had to take up the Operation Sindoor in response to the Pahalgam attack. Now let us discuss the challenges that the bilateral relations face, starting with the border disputes. First, let us take up the dispute related to the Siachen Glacier. The Siachen Glacier is a triangular region marked by the point NJ9842 in the south, the Indra Col in the west, and the Karakoram Pass in the east. Because the Siachen Glacier is an integral part of India, therefore the line of control should pass along the Saltoro Ridge, that is between the point Indra Col to the point NJ9842. But after the Shingla Agreement, the line of control was left undemarcated north of the point NJ9842, and Pakistan started claiming the Siachen Glacier as its own. Therefore, India had to take the possession of the Siachen Glacier by placing its troops along the Saltoro Ridge through the Operation Meghdoot in 1984. And this Siachen Glacier is strategic in nature because it is at a high altitude. It acts like a watchtower, and therefore through this we can maintain a vigil regarding the activities in the Pakistan occupied Kashmir region. Plus, the Siachen Glacier separates the Pakistan occupied Kashmir from China. Therefore, it is having immense strategic significance. Therefore, Indian troops guard the Saltoro Ridge. Next, there is the dispute regarding the Sar Creek region. The Sar Creek region is a narrow creek, but this is having immense significance because drug trafficking and also smuggling happens through the Sar Creek region, and this is between the Indian state of Gujarat and Pakistan. The Indian position is that the boundary, the international boundary, should pass through the middle of the creek. That is in line with the Thalweg doctrine also, that the international boundary should be demarcated through the middle point of the Sar Creek, whereas Pakistan claims the entire Sar Creek and claims that the boundary should go along the green line, which is therefore again a disputed region. Next, there is the Gilgit-Baltistan issue. This region lies inside the area which is administered by Pakistan, but the Pakistan occupied Kashmir, although it is occupied and administered by Pakistan, but it is an integral part of India. And the problem is the China-Pakistan economic corridor passes through the Pakistan occupied Kashmir. Therefore, it affects India's territorial integrity and sovereignty, therefore protested by India. Now, what are the repercussions of these disputes? First, it has led to a limited economic integration between the two countries. For example, the trade between the two countries has been hovering just around $1 billion even when it was allowed. And as per a World Bank report in 2018, the report A Glass Half Full, the promise of regional trade in South Asia, even when the trade was allowed between the two countries, the actual potential was 18 times of the trade happening in ground reality between the two countries. Plus, the tariff and non-tariff barriers between the two countries are high. For example, India awarded Pakistan with the MFN status, the most favored nation status, for decades. But Pakistan still maintained a negative list of around 1200 products, whereby the barriers were imposed regarding the exports from India into Pakistan. Similarly, the terrorism emanating from Pakistan also impacted trade. For example, there was a drop in the trade ties, the trade between the two countries after the Pulwama attack. This has also stalled not only the economic integration between India and Pakistan, but also the regional integration. For example, the intra-regional trade, the trade between the countries within South Asia is just about 5% as compared to around 50% of the intra-regional trade in the East Asian region countries. Also, the ties between the member countries in the South Asian region have turned sour because of the limited engagement between India and Pakistan. Therefore, the effectiveness of the platforms like SAARC and SAFTA, the South Asian Free Trade Agreement, has been very low. Similarly, it has led to a costly arms race. The arms race between India and Pakistan, both countries have to spend immensely on the defense budgets. India's defense spending has continuously been rising. For example, in 2023 itself, as per the SIPRI report, the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, India spent around $83 billion on the defense budget. Therefore, that accounted about 2.4% of India's GDP. Similarly, Pakistan's military burden as a percentage of GDP is even higher, that is accounting around 3.6% of its GDP, even though the economy of Pakistan is in doldrums. And both the countries have the nuclear risk also because both possess the nuclear weapons as well. Plus, it hinders India's strategic interests. Because of such tussles, the regional engagement is blocked. it limits India's influence. It limits India's aspirations of becoming a regional power first. For example, influence in the Central Asian region. Because of the lack of connectivity, therefore India has to explore the alternate routes via, for example, Iran. Therefore, India's investments in the Chabahar port in Iran, or the connections with Afghanistan because of the lack of the land route provided by Pakistan, or regarding the connections with West Asia as well. Plus, Pakistan enjoys geopolitical leverage. For example, the leverage with USA. Earlier, it was with respect to the US getting out of Afghanistan. Therefore, Pakistan was helping USA. Now, with respect to the negotiations with Iran, Pakistan again playing a key role. Similarly, the leverage with respect to China, because it allows China connectivity to the Indian Ocean via the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. Similarly, the leverage with respect to Russia, because Russia exports arms and energy to Pakistan as well. Plus, Pakistan provides the energy routes for the export of oil and natural gas from Russia, because Russia is economically dependent upon the export of energy from Russia. Plus, there is the internationalization of the disputes which is done by Pakistan. For example, the propaganda that Pakistan does with respect to the raising of the Kashmir issue at the United Nations, or the propaganda at the OIC, the Organization of the Islamic Countries, against India. Then there are certain peripheral issues also, but they are also persistent in nature. For example, the frequent arrests of the Indian fishermen who venture near the international waters, even though they are staying out of the Pakistani waters, the Pakistani territorial waters. Plus, the drug smuggling which happens, and the infiltration of drugs into India because of the proximity to the Golden Crescent formed by Pakistan, Afghanistan and Iran. Plus, the pumping of the fake currency notes into India, fake Indian currency notes, as you would have observed, as portrayed by the movie Dhurandhar as well. Now, coming to trade specific ties as well, India has accorded the most favored nation to Pakistan, but Pakistan still maintained a negative list of around 1200 products restricting imports from India. Then the imports were allowed through the Wagah border also, but those imports were allowed for just about 150 odd products, because that was absolutely necessary for Pakistan. And another challenge is that of trade surplus. India's exports to Pakistan are often to the tune of $1 billion or more, whereas India's imports from Pakistan are less than $300 million, usually when the trade was allowed earlier. Then there was a complete pause itself after August 2019 because of the abrogation of Article 370 by India, and therefore Pakistan abrogating trade with India. Now, why did Pakistan want to resume trade with India? Because it had its own motives. For example, the trade was already surging quietly. The trade was already happening via the indirect routes, for example, via Dubai. Plus, there is the economic crisis that Pakistan was facing. For example, there were floods there in 2022. Then there was economic crisis, for example, the dwindling of the forex reserves, the rise in the imports, rise in the fuel costs in Pakistan, and it had to approach the International Monetary Fund, the IMF and the other countries for loan, for example, seeking loans from Saudi Arabia, even UAE also, which was even asking for the repayment of the loan that it had given to Pakistan. And then there were indirect routes also which were already being utilized for the trade between India and Pakistan. For example, the trade via Dubai, Singapore or Sri Lanka. And whereas if the direct route was allowed, direct trade was allowed between India and Pakistan, that would have rather improved the efficiency of the logistics, bringing down the logistics cost, therefore bringing down the cost of various products in Pakistan. And Pakistan's relations with Afghanistan and Iran were also on the decline. For example, there were concerns, skirmishes on the Afghanistan border, therefore the clashes with Taliban fighters, and also the relations with Iran were also not so good. For example, the missile strikes by Iran into Pakistan earlier. But there are certain challenges that were there regarding the normalization of the trade ties between India and Pakistan. For example, there is the presence of hardliners in Pakistan. they do not want the trade ties between India and Pakistan to resume. For example, Bilawal Bhutto Zardari in Pakistan. And the role of the Pakistani army never wanted the ties between India and Pakistan to normalize. Otherwise, the clout of the Pakistani army would have become lesser and lesser. Then Pakistan also demanded regarding the restoration of Article 370, which was an outrightly unjust demand because that is an internal matter of India, and anyway the entire Kashmir is an integral part of India. Then the terrorism and trade, they cannot go hand in hand. This was observed even by the External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar, that trade and terrorism, they cannot go on simultaneously. First, Pakistan has to curb terrorism, then only trade can resume between India and Pakistan. And Pakistan had even been denying the usage of airspace by the Indian airlines. Therefore, they have to take longer routes, burning more fuel, therefore reducing the logistics efficiency. And even it had denied the land route for the export of wheat from India to Afghanistan. Therefore, India had to take up longer routes for the export of wheat to Afghanistan. Now, what are the suggestions that we can give for the normalization, for the betterment of the ties between India and Pakistan? First, we can focus upon building of a security community within the South Asian region, whereby there is a building of the mutual trust, building of the confidence building measures, so that there is dialogue which is promoted. There are confidence building measures, for example, the exchange of prisoners, more sporting visas can be given, the religious pilgrimage can be encouraged. For example, the Kartarpur corridor was reopened in the past. Or we can also learn from the Bajwa Doctrine. Bajwa Doctrine in Pakistan had recommended Pakistan itself to ensure that it reconciles relations with its neighbors, especially with India, and goes with the route of peace, goes with the route of amity, and ensures the focus upon economic growth, focus upon trade, and even rebuilding of the ties with the USA, rather than focusing upon the terrorism or the non-state actors within Pakistan. Similarly, we can explore the back-channel diplomacy also, which has been now advocated by several political leaders, as well soft power diplomacy as well with Pakistan. Now, there is a means practice question as well. India-Pakistan relations continue to be shaped by unresolved border disputes and limited economic engagement. Examine the challenges arising from the border disputes and the trade restrictions between India and Pakistan. Suggest measures for improving bilateral relations while safeguarding India's national interests. Please try to write it. The next article is related to the glacial lakes expansion, as the glacial lakes in Arunachal Pradesh have expanded in the last decade as per a recent study. Therefore, we'll discuss the cryohydrological hazards that India faces, the causes of the glacial lake outburst floods, the mitigation strategies to tackle the glacial lake outburst floods, and a few suggestions in this regard. This is important in GS1 under the topic important geophysical phenomena such as earthquake, volcanic activity, tsunami, etc., and also in GS3 under the topic disaster management. First, let us observe what are the cryohydrological hazards that India faces. The cryohydrological hazards are influenced by the interaction between the cryosphere and the hydrological systems. The cryosphere means the ice and snow, and the hydrological systems are denoted by the water flows. Now, what are the kinds of cryohydrological hazards? One of the first ones is the glacial lake outburst floods. The glacial lake outburst floods are caused by the sudden release of the water from the glacial lakes. This is caused usually by the breach of the ice dams, for example. Then there is the ice patch collapses. The ice patches collapse when there is instability in the slope, therefore triggering flash floods. Then there are rock ice avalanches. The rock ice avalanches are caused by the large quantities of rock and ice collapsing because of steep slopes and therefore instability of the slopes, therefore triggering landslides. Then there are permafrost landslides also. When the gradual melting of the permafrost also happens, this causes instability of the slope, therefore landslides are triggered again causing therefore a cryohydrological hazard. Now, what are the factors behind it? What causes it? Both natural factors as well as man-made factors. The natural factors include the tectonic fragility, the Young Himalayas mountains, they are especially tectonically fragile. They are still building, they are young, there are landslides also, therefore there are increased chances of avalanches also because of steep slopes and tectonic fragility. Then there is nevation instability, because the nevation hollows, they experience frequent and repeated freezing, thawing, then again freezing, then again thawing. Thawing means melting. And therefore, for example, the Srikanta glacier that also caused in 2025 the Dharali flood. Then there is the extreme weather which also contributes to the cryohydrological hazards. For example, heavy rain, cloudbursts, avalanches. These lead to the destabilization of the glaciers as well as the melting of the glaciers. For example, the Uttarakhand flash floods. Then there are anthropological factors also. For example, the global warming. The global warming leads to the melting of the glaciers. This causes the accumulation of the glacier melt, formation of more glacial lakes, expansion of the glacial lakes because of more glacial melting. Therefore, for example, the South Lonak Lake in Sikkim, that has been growing because of the melting of the glacier. Then there are greenhouse gas emissions also. They also cause the cryohydrological hazards. For example, they cause again the temperature rise. Because of the temperature rise, again the glacier melting, destabilizing of the glaciers and the meltwater accumulation. Plus, there is the building of the linear infrastructure also. Linear infrastructure to support more tourism, to support more hydropower projects, building of more roads and highways, that also destabilizes the ecosystem in the cold mountain regions especially. Now, what are the glacial lakes? The glacial lakes are the body of the water that originates from a glacier. They are usually formed at the foot of the glacier, but they may form under it or they may form in it also. For example, when a glacier is retreating, you can observe here, there can be the formation of a bedrock dammed glacial lake, or there can be a formation of the glacial lake beneath the glacier also. For example, the accumulation of the water via the crevasses, and this is the subglacial lake. The ISRO has also categorized the glacial lakes as moraine dammed lake, ice dammed lake, erosion based lake, etc. And dams are also formed by moraines as well. And these dams formed by moraines, these are usually dense and stable, because that is having the dams caused by the rocks as well, and they are holding sizable lakes behind them, and these lakes survive for years. But these are becoming leaky also, and then they start draining slowly into the nearby rivers. Therefore, they become a crucial source of fresh water for the rivers. But there is a risk of the glacial lakes as well, as they can cause the glacial lake outburst floods and therefore release of large volumes of meltwater if the natural dams fail, whether it is a moraine dam or a ice dam. Now, what are the causes of the glacial lake outburst floods specifically? One of the primary causes remains the global warming, because the glaciers are melting and retreating because of the global warming. And 2023 and 2024, they were one of the hottest years on record. Therefore, the lakes have been expanding. The glacial lakes, they have been expanding beyond the capacity of the glaciers to hold them. For example, the number of lakes have expanded by 53%, the glacial lakes, and this data is since 1990 itself. In the past 3.5 decades itself, the number of lakes have expanded by 53%. The glacial lakes, the area has expanded by 51% and the volume has expanded by about 48%. There has been a glacial surging also, because there has been a rapid glacial advance. For example, the Gilkey Glacier in Alaska. There has been structural failures also. For example, the moraines are breached because they have been unstable due to the internal erosion, due to hydrostatic pressure, due to thawing, that is melting of the permafrost. For example, the South Lonak glacial outburst flood in Sikkim. Then there is mass movement also sometimes. The mass movement of rocks, debris and even ice also. When it suddenly enters into a lake, it will cause a wave of displacement. and this will again cause a flood. For example, the 2021 Chamoli Glacial Lake outburst flood. Then there are cascading events also, for example earthquakes. These also cause the instability in the slopes, breaching of the dams, ice dam as well as moraine dams, and therefore again triggering the glacial lake outburst floods. There are anthropogenic factors also. For example, the rise in urbanization, more construction in the mountainous regions, illegal mining, deforestation, construction of more hydro projects, the construction of more linear projects in the mountainous regions. What does it do? It changes the drainage patterns there. It reduces the stability of the slopes. So when in the future any earthquake comes, even a mild earthquake, it can cause huge avalanches, landslides, which will trigger the glacial lake outburst floods. As per an IIT Roorkee study, there are more than 31,000 glacial lakes which are growing in the high mountain Asia, and the area increase of about 5.5% has happened, and the highest area in the eastern Himalayas itself. Now, what are the mitigation strategies adopted for tackling the glacial lake outburst floods? We have the National Glacial Lake Outburst Flood Risk Mitigation Project. The program involves the hazard assessment. The hazard assessment is done for the high risk glacial lakes. We are monitoring the high risk glacial lakes. There are early warning systems installed. For example, the automated water and weather stations installed. The risk mitigation is done by the construction of the water flow channels to stop the glacial lake outburst floods. Similarly, there is the adoption of technology, for example, the SAR interferometry for the slope stability. There is the satellite mapping which is done by ISRO. Simultaneously, the National Disaster Management Authority maintains a continuous monitoring of 195 high-risk glacial lakes as well. The Central Water Commission also monitors it, and the risk indexing is done for the glacial lakes. The early warning systems are installed. For example, the sensors detect the sudden water level changes. There is the installation of automatic weather stations. For example, it is installed in Sikkim. Scientific surveys are conducted so that we can predict them in advance. For example, bathymetry surveys to determine the depth of the glacial lakes, the slope studies. There is structural engineering also which is utilized. For example, siphoning out of the water from the glacial lakes which are exceeding their capacity, pumping the water out, or the artificial spillways are constructed. The artificial spillways to control the discharge of water from the glacial lakes. There are several global initiatives also. For example, to ensure the transboundary cooperation between countries for the transboundary glacial lakes, data sharing is done, and it is done under the Sendai framework, the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. There are community-based disaster risk reduction initiatives taken up. For example, training of the local first responders, training of the local volunteers who can observe this and also warn in advance. Now, what are the challenges that are faced in the mitigation of the glacial lake outburst floods? Firstly, the data deficit is observed, especially regarding the remote locations, the remote hamlets. They remain inaccessible for much of the year. Therefore, the data collection is poor, and because of their high altitude and poor terrain, the data collection becomes even more difficult. Then the data collected, that is also mostly collected after the disaster has happened. Even the remote sensing data, that is utilized to observe where the disasters are happened rather than using it for prediction. Then the climate change is another challenge, as it is accelerating the melting of the glaciers. This causes the increase in the lake volumes and therefore more pressure upon the glacial lakes. There are gaps in the automated monitoring systems. There are very few early warning systems which are installed, and the gaps in the satellite imaging as well. Plus, there are more flash floods which are caused due to silting. Now, what are the suggestions that we can give regarding the mitigation of the glacial lake outburst floods? Firstly, we need to invest in technology. The indigenous technology development is needed. For example, development of sensors for real-time monitoring. For the installation of more early warning systems, for that we can incentivize the startups, for example, establishing a challenge fund through which the startups can be incentivized to develop more early warning systems, to develop sensors, etc. And we can also utilize the ISRO Glacial Lake Atlas as well. The audits need to be conducted, the audits for the Glacial Lake outburst floods. For that, the risk assessments can be done utilizing the satellite data in the detailed project reports for the hydropower projects as well as the new road projects. The cross-border alert systems can be set up by having cooperation with the other countries, for which real-time glacial lake outburst flood related data can be shared with the neighboring countries, that is Nepal, Bhutan and China. The structural suggestions can be given, for example, building of more dams, building of more protective barriers, strengthening of embankments. The community participation can also be encouraged, for example, involving more volunteer groups, involving volunteer forces in the remote hamlets, remote areas, especially for the monitoring of the glacial lakes, forecasting of the glacial lake outburst floods, and for the emergency response as well. That way we will be also integrating both the local knowledge as well as the scientific systems. There is a mains practice question also. The glacial lake outburst floods have emerged as a significant climate-induced disaster risk in the Himalayan region. Discuss the causes of the glacial lake outburst floods and suggest the mitigation measures as well. Please try to write it. Next, in the mains value addition section, we'll have a discussion regarding the expanding interpretation of the Article 21 through a few case laws. As the Supreme Court observed now that the right to work is also a fundamental right. It is a fundamental right implicitly through Articles 19 and 21, as there is a right to movement under Article 19 Clause 1 Clause D, and it should be read with Articles 19 1A, B and C, that is the freedom of expression, assembly and to form associations, as well as through Article 21, that is the right to life and personal liberty. Now let us observe how the interpretation of Article 21 has evolved over time. Initially, the first phase of evolution was the interpretation from a literal interpretation in the A.K. Gopalan case to a liberal interpretation in the Menka Gandhi case. In the A.K. Gopalan case, the Supreme Court had interpreted Article 21 literally. It was a narrow interpretation that the right to life and personal liberty, it is ensuring the physical liberty, and the procedure established by law, the term written in the Article 21 ensures that the Article 21 guarantees protection only against arbitrary executive action and no protection against arbitrary laws. But subsequently, through the Menka Gandhi versus Union of India case, the court gave it a liberal interpretation, a wide interpretation for the Article 21, the right to life and personal liberty, that it included not only protection against arbitrary executive action but also against arbitrary laws, therefore indirectly including the due process of law and even protecting the principles of natural justice in India. Subsequently, there has been more widening of the scope of the Article 21. For example, the Olga Tellis versus the Bombay Municipal Corporation, observing that the right to livelihood is also implicitly a part of right to life and personal liberty. That is, for the effective enjoyment of the right to life and personal liberty, there must be a right to livelihood as well. These are a series of cases which you can quote if you are expressly writing an answer regarding the evolution of Article 21 or the evolution or the expansion of the fundamental rights in India, or if you are writing a specific question regarding these. For example, the Subramaniam Swamy versus Union of India case, the court observed that there is a right to reputation as well that is included implicitly within Article 21. Similarly, the Hussainara Khatun versus Home Secretary State of Bihar case, the court observed that there is a right to speedy trial. Even in M.H. Hoskote case, the court had observed that there is a right to free legal aid as well. And the Justice Puttaswamy versus Union of India case, the court observed that there is even the right to privacy, which is implicitly included within Article 21, the right to life and personal liberty. In Subhash Kumar versus State of Bihar case, the court observed that there is a right to clean water and a right to clean air that is required for the right to life itself. Similarly, in MC Mehta versus Union of India, the court observed that there is a right to clean, healthy and pollution-free environment. When you are writing an answer in GS3 as well, for example, an answer in climate change or pollution, there also you can quote these case laws. In DK Basu versus the state of West Bengal, the court observed that if there is custodial violence, if there is custodial torture, it amounts to a violation of right to life and personal liberty. It amounts to a violation of Article 21. In Common Cause versus Union of India, the court observed that the right to life and personal liberty contains implicitly within itself a right to die with dignity as well. And now even passive euthanasia is allowed in India. In Sunil Batra versus Delhi administration case, the court observed that the prisoner's dignity also has to be maintained. They also have the protection via Article 21 against inhuman treatment in the correctional institutions, that is in the prisons. The next article is related to INS Dunagiri, Sanshodhak and Agray, the three indigenously built naval ships which will be commissioned. This is important in prelims under the topic current events of national and international importance. First, regarding the INS Dunagiri, this is the fifth ship of the Nilgiri class. It is part of the Project 17A and it has been designed by the Warship Design Bureau. It has been built at the Garden Rich Shipbuilders and Engineers in Kolkata, and it is propelled by a diesel engine and a gas turbine, and they drive a controllable pitch propeller. What are the arms that are included in the INS Dunagiri? It is armed with BrahMos surface-to-surface missile. It can be armed with the multifunction radar, as well as a medium-range surface-to-air missile, as well as a 76 mm super rapid gun mount, and rocket and torpedoes as well for anti-submarine warfare. Next, there is the Sanshodhak survey vessel. This is the fourth large survey vessel for India. The previous survey vessels for India included the large survey vessels, the INS Sandhyak, Nirdeshak and INS Ikshak. Now, what is the role of the Sanshodhak survey vessel? It can conduct the coastal surveys, deep water surveys, the hydrographic deep water surveys of the ports and harbor approaches. Therefore, it will be useful for determining the navigation channels or the routes. It can also collect the oceanographic and geophysical data for defense applications as well as for civilian applications. What are the features of the Sanshodhak survey vessel? It has the hydrographic equipment. It is equipped with the data acquisition and processing systems, autonomous underwater vehicle, remotely operated vehicle, digital side scan sonar. And in terms of propulsion, it is propelled by two diesel engines, and it can reach the speeds in excess of 18 knots, and it has been built having indigenous content of more than 80% by coast. Next, there is the Agray. Agray is the fourth of the 8 anti-submarine warfare shallow water craft. This has also been indigenously designed and built by the Garden Rich Shipbuilders and Engineers, and it is a successor of the erstwhile INS Agray. The erstwhile INS Agray was part of the 1241 PE class of the patrol vessels, but it was decommissioned in 2017. Now, what are the features of Agray? It is employing a water jet propulsion. It is the largest Indian naval warship to use water jet propulsion. What are the armaments that it has? It is equipped with lightweight torpedoes, indigenous rocket launchers, as well as a shallow water sonar. The sensor is advanced shallow water sonar system. What is the significance of Agray? It will augment Indian Navy's anti-submarine and mine warfare capabilities. Plus, it will be useful for coastal surveillance as well. The next article is related to sickle cell anemia, as President Draupadi Murmu observed that sickle cell anemia will be eradicated by 2047. This is important in prelims under the topic current events of national and international importance. Therefore, let's discuss first what is sickle cell anemia. The sickle cell anemia causes a distortion in the shape of the red blood cells. Normally, the red blood cells, they are round in shape, but when there is sickle cell anemia, then they become C-shaped. They become the shape of a sickle, a farm tool. The RBCs, the red blood cells, they contain hemoglobin, a protein carrying oxygen. But when there is sickle cell disease, then the hemoglobin is abnormal and the RBC becomes hard and sticky. It looks like a C-shaped farm tool, the sickle. Now what happens in sickle cell anemia? Usually the RBCs are around the red blood cells, therefore they move easily through the blood vessels. But the sickle cell RBCs, they become slow, they even block the blood flow as well. Therefore the sickle cells, they die early. There becomes a shortage of the red blood cells in the body of the patient, and it deprives the body of oxygen. It even causes obstructions and shortages. They may cause further chronic anemia, pain, fatigue, stroke, etc. Now, can the sickle cell anemia be treated? It is a genetic disorder, but it can be treated via the gene therapy. For example, the DNA inside the hemoglobin gene can be edited, or it can be treated via the stem cell transplants, that is bone marrow replacement, but it is still costly and therefore it is still in the developmental phase. And it can be done through the blood transfusion also, by transfusing more red blood cells. But there are challenges. For example, there is a scarcity of the donors firstly. Then the safe supply of the blood has to be ensured, because there is a risk of infection if the blood is infected. Additionally, there is the BIRSA 101 therapy also, which was recently innovated. This is a gene editing tool which corrects the mutations in the genetic code. It was developed by the CSIR Institute of Genomics and Integrative Biology. We have the National Sickle Cell Anemia Elimination Mission also. Through the Union Budget 2023-2024, the mission to eliminate the sickle cell anemia by 2047. There are awareness and screening programs which are held for people from ages 0 to 40, and it is especially in the India's tribal belt where the prevalence is higher, that is in Odisha, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra. The vital medicines like hydroxyurea are also given in the essential medicines list. The next article is related to the Financial Action Task Force, as the Culture Secretary is the new Financial Action Task Force Vice President. This is important in prelims under the topic Current Events of National and International Importance. The FATF is an independent intergovernmental body, and it develops the policies to tackle money laundering and financing of terrorism, anti-money laundering and the countering of financing of terrorism, for which it has given the 40+9 recommendations. These 40+9 recommendations, they are functioning like the global anti-money laundering and countering of financing of terrorism standard. This was established in 1989 at the G7 summit in Paris. There the focus was especially on the anti-money laundering, which was the concern at that time. But in 2001, its mandate was expanded to include the countering of financing of terrorism. The headquarters of the FATF is located in Paris in France. The member countries are 39 countries including USA, India, China, Saudi Arabia, UK, Germany, France and European Union, and India has been a member since 2010. There are more than 180 countries which are affiliated through a network of the FATF style regional bodies as well. Now, what are the functions of the FATF? It researches how the money laundering and the financing of terrorism happens, the methodologies that they adopt, plus it comes up with the global standards to mitigate the risks from these. It assesses whether the countries are following the recommendations. It assesses the actions taken by the countries. It also produces reports to raise the awareness regarding the techniques adopted by the money laundering and the financing of terrorist activities. The members must endorse the recommendations of the Financial Action Task Force, and it is evaluated by the other member countries. That is, they must commit to subjecting themselves to evaluation by the other member countries. And if a member repeatedly fails to implement the FATF standards regarding the anti-money laundering and countering of financing of terrorism, then they can be included in the grey list or the black list. The blacklist contains the countries' names which are non-cooperative, or the territories which are non-cooperative, which are supporting the money laundering and financing of terrorism. The grey list is a list of the countries which are treated like safe havens. The safe havens for supporting of the money laundering and financing of terrorism. The inclusion in the grey list of the FATF serves as a warning to that country that if they do not implement the recommendations of the FATF, then they may be entered into the blacklist. Now, what is the purpose of the blacklist? The consequences of a country being on the blacklist: If a country is in the blacklist, then they will get no financial aid from the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank or the Asian Development Bank or even the European Union also. And there can be sanctions imposed upon that country. International economic and financial sanctions and restrictions can be imposed upon a country if it is included in the blacklist of the FATF. The next article is related to Monetary Policy Committee. This is important in prelims under the topic Economic and Social Development. The monetary policy involves the usage of the monetary instruments. For what? For regulating the interest rates, for controlling the money supply in the economy, for ensuring the availability of the credit. And this responsibility lies with the RBI. This responsibility is given through the RBI Act 1934. The primary objective of the monetary policy, therefore, is to ensure price stability. Price stability to ensure that the growth is sustainable, because if there is excessive focus upon only growth and the price is not controlled, it will lead to too much inflation and then the growth will not be sustainable. Therefore, there was a 2016 amendment as well to the RBI Act 1934, which gives a statutory basis for the implementation of the flexible inflation targeting framework. That is, the inflation target is to be set by the government in consultation with the RBI once in 5 years. Therefore, it is done by the Monetary Policy Committee. The Monetary Policy Committee is constituted by the central government under section 45ZB, and its function is to fix the repo rate. It replaced the earlier system of the Technical Advisory Committee. The composition of the Monetary Policy Committee is, it has 6 members. One of them is the RBI Governor, who functions as the chairperson of the committee. Then there is the Deputy Governor in charge of the monetary policy, one official nominated by the RBI board, plus there are 3 more members which are representing the Government of India. The external members, they hold the office for a period of 4 years. The quorum for a meeting for the Monetary Policy Committee is 4 members. At least the governor should be present, or in his absence, the deputy governor, who is a member of the Monetary Policy Committee, should be present. The decisions are taken on the basis of a majority vote. In case there is a tie, then the RBI governor will have the second vote or the casting vote. The decision of the Monetary Policy Committee will be binding upon the RBI. The RBI's Monetary Policy Department assists the Monetary Policy Committee in the formulation of the monetary policy, and the Monetary Policy Committee should meet at least 4 times in a year. Thank you.